Joe here, and in this video, we're going to be going through all the implementation steps of PWA Pro, and you're going to be blown away by how easy it is. Okay, so here we have the PWA demo file that ships with the PWA stacks, and what we'll see is that PWA comes with 3 stacks as of right now. There's the PWA manifest, which we'll look at, the no cache stack, and PWA Pro, okay? We're going to dive into the manifest file first, okay? And so here we're going to create a dedicated page just for this stack. And there's some caveats here. And it's kind of listed out in the PWA stack, right? The PWA manifest stack. So you're going to create a new stacks page. You're going to call it manifest, okay? The folder name has to be /manifest. The file name has to be index.php. There's no other ways around it. You have to have that folder name and that file name, okay? And if you ever forget, it's all listed right here in the PWA manifest stack as well. And the manifest stack should be the only thing on this page, okay? And the URL has to be /manifest. So next up is there's some rules that this isn't required, but it is nice to have inside your htaccess file. You're going to go ahead and paste these rules. You don't need to modify it anything. Just copy and paste these into your htaccess file. That's it. Okay, that's all you have to do. Now, before we actually dive into the settings, I should back up and talk about what this manifest stack is doing for us. Essentially, what this manifest file is doing, okay, or what this URL is doing, browsers are going to request this, and this contains all of the data about our installable PWA app. Okay, so what is the name of the app? Like, what is the full long name? Okay, what is the short name? So like when you actually install the app on the home screen, that is actually going to be the name of your app. Okay, what is the description? Okay, there's things such as the background color, the theme color. Okay, so that is when you launch the app, before the actual web app is loaded, what's going to be the background color? Okay. And then for phones that have notches, like what's the color of the background behind the notch after your web app has loaded, right? So this really gives your app or your PWA site a native look and feel by defining these colors, okay? Next up is going to be our start URL. Now, if you've noticed, if you visit foundationstacks.com, even if you install it to the home screen from that home page, okay, it actually loads foundationstacks.com/demo, okay? And what this does is that allows us to, no matter what page you actually add it to the home screen, what is going to be the start URL or the home page of the app, okay? Next is going to be link scope. And I've set this here to be foundationstacks.com/demo as well. And essentially, any URL that's outside of that will actually get loaded in an external browser window. Okay, so really cool there. Next up is how do we want this to be displayed? Now, most of the time you're going to want standalone, but if you want minimal UI or browser, so like if you want browser, you still want the browser controls to show up. This is what you can use there, okay? And orientation. There are some things with iOS that will only display in portrait. Next up is our app icons, okay? And these allows us to, you have to upload these. These have to be warehoused URLs, so you can add them to your RapidWeaver resources if you want. So just go ahead and go into your resources, and then you can load your icons into here, and then you can right-click, copy URL, okay? And then paste that URL directly into here. These have to be a 512 pixel PNG and 192 pixel PNG, okay? Next is our caching parameters. So by default, data will be cached for 7 days. After 7 days, a new version of whatever asset is being used will be requested to get a new one. Now, 7 days is a decent default, but I mean, really, you can go up to 30 days or 50 days or 60 or 100 days. It really doesn't matter, right? Because I actually have a lot of built-in checks here for caching and publishing. And then the last settings here are for manually loading assets. This is an optional step, okay? By default, PWA will load pages that have been visited for offline access. So if a page is visited, it will be loaded into the cache. However, you can actually manually define external resources that maybe aren't on a web page to be downloaded and installed. So for example here, now you have to load every resource. That includes every image, every HTML page, every CSS, every JavaScript file. You can't just put the URL of the web page and assume all of that web page's assets will be loaded. Nope, you have to have a comma delimited list of every URL asset on a web page in order for it to get installed and downloaded once a user installs the app. Okay. So here we have just kind of normal assets. You can put like JavaScript files, CSS files. Then you can do fonts. So if you have font files that you want to make sure are loaded, and then you can have images. So I kind of have three just to kind of break them up for an organization. And then also we have ignore. So there could be some files that you want to make sure that you just blatantly ignore, right? And so here you can just put in keywords, a comma delimited list of keywords. And if that keyword exists anywhere inside of the URL, that URL or that asset will be ignored. For example, if you put in ignore anything that has admin in it, at that point, anything that is in your admin area of your website will get ignored. Now, before we close up this video, let's just go over some publishing and caching tips that we have for PWA. And they're all listed right here in the stack so that you can't forget them, okay? First off is PWA requires that your website be HTTPS, okay? Browsers will not allow you to install a PWA unless your site has strict HTTPS rules. And hopefully you're a member of the Weaverspace community, and I have a great FAQ there that talks about how you can force SSL and stuff like that inside your htaccess file. So make sure that your website, it's impossible to get to your website without it being redirected to an SSL HTTPS version of that site. So if you're not a member of the Weaverspace community, go ahead and join there and check out this great FAQ. Next up is you have to make sure that you have generate cache busting links enabled. So this is inside your advanced RapidWeaver settings, and you go to generate cache busting links right here. This has to be enabled unless you want your cache never to be, expire. Okay, is very important setting is to make sure that this generate cache busting links is enabled in your project. Now, if you ever come to an issue where you're potentially not seeing browsers update cached information, so you've published your site and you're wondering what the heck's going on, okay? So if you go ahead and do republish all files, okay? What this will do is whenever you republish all files within a RapidWeaver project, it should invalidate every cache on every visitor's installed web app. Okay, so essentially what that means is the next time the web app will be loaded, it'll load the cached version first, and then in the background, it'll fetch the new version so that the next time it loads, it should load the new version that you republished with all files. So that is a great fail-safe where if you want to make sure that things are recached, go ahead and republish all files, okay? I actually recommend when you're done with a site, always republish all files with PWA. Because what that does is it makes sure that cache busting links is the same across all of your web pages. Okay. So you never want to publish just one page. You can for testing, but once you're done, you should always republish all files. Okay. Because then that will ensure that the cache busting links are the same and identical across your entire website. And one more good thing to do is after you've republished all files, there's two things you could do. You can actually just preview any web page, okay, that has PWA Pro on it. So we haven't talked about this stack yet, but you can go ahead and preview any web page that has this. And what it will do is it'll forcefully tell your web server to reinstall the service worker, which we haven't gone into yet. Okay. And so whenever you preview that, that will force a new install of the PWA's service worker. Now, another way to handle that, if you open up your browser and visit your website /manifest, so you actually visit that manifest, this in the background, whenever you visit this URL, It'll check to see if a new service worker needs to be installed. And if it is, it will actually install one so that it gets installed next time your PWA is loaded by the browser. Next up is your web icons in your project. You're going to want to make sure that all of your website icons here are properly created and added into here. These are used by PWA, and a lot of these are used based on, this is actually used for Retina displays. This is used for iPads. So those are the icons that are actually going to be used by iOS when you install it on the iOS device. We're almost at the end here, is the Pwa Pro Stack. Now, this is the stack that you're going to actually add to every single web page that you want to make sure gets cached and loaded and loads PWA on the website. Okay. Now, there's a few settings in here. So we have similarly to the colors that we have inside the manifest, you're going to want to define these colors here as well. And this is just because Android versus Safari versus iOS versus Microsoft, they kind of all load these color data in different places. So this is where we're going to load that data here. Next is on iOS. If you want to make sure this is a full screen app, go ahead and click on that. Else, if you uncheck it, it'll load the browser window Chrome. Okay. Again, some of this data was actually inside the manifest file. iOS requires that it actually has it on the local page as well as a meta tag. So that's what this checkbox does. And lastly, completely optional here is you can actually manually define icon URLs. Now, these are the same icons that are defined in the web icons tab. Okay. Now, these are completely optional. The only place I really strongly recommend that you actually use these is if you're on a page that has something like PageSafe on it. Okay. And the reason is PageSafe actually doesn't display any of the web page content. So all that metadata that is added by RapidWeaver to display these icons never gets displayed to the browser. So if you have PageSafe, I recommend that you use these icons, and PWA is integrated with PageSafe so that they kind of talk to each other. And PWA gives these icons to PageSafe so that PageSafe can load that PWA aspect of the web page for your users. Okay. So if you are using something like PageSafe or Total CMS Protect, make sure that you're actually loading these here so that the proper icons get displayed, even if the page is locked for your users. Now, lastly is the PWA no cache stack. So if you are on a page that you want to force PWA not to cache the HTML, okay, you would add this PWA no cache. So this really isn't needed with PageSafe and Protect and Total CMS Protect because I've kind of integrated those into it. But if you're using something like SiteLock and you want to make sure that the login page doesn't get cached, you're going to want to make sure you have this PWA no cache stack on the page. Again, this will ensure that the HTML of that request doesn't get cached and the user doesn't kind of get in this infinite loop of always getting the login screen, because the PWA will cache the login screen. And even after you log in, it'll go, oh, hey, I got that page loaded already in cache. I'm just going to load it again. And then they get the login screen again, right? So this PWA no cache stack fixes that so that, the user doesn't get caught in this infinite login loop. So I thought it'd be fun to look at an actual implementation. This is the foundationstacks.com project file, and I thought it'd be fun to have a look at it. So here we have the manifest file. Actually, the manifest file here was kind of used as a base for the PWA demo project. So a lot of the data here will look familiar, okay? You'll notice here inside assets, I kind of preload all the HTML. I put in all the URLs to every web page just so that the HTML for the pages at least gets cached on load. I didn't go as far as loading in every CSS and every JavaScript file and all that jazz. But I do load the HTML just so that that gets downloaded initially so that that initial load is a lot faster, okay? And then I did load all the fonts and a few images that I know are used kind of site-wide. Next up, you'll notice that if we start going into some of the pages, if we go into, I have a partial here. So we go into our partial, and then we have, I think it's inside demo styles and here. So now this is a Foundation 6, obviously a Foundation 6 project. So here I have inside site styles, the PWA Pro Stack. Okay. So I have that stored inside this partial, and obviously this partial is used across all pages so that PWA Pro is on all of the pages, right? Next up, we go to the web icons. I have all my web icons here, and that pretty much does it, right? Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. The manifest, this page is probably the most work, the PWA Pro Stack. You just kind of chuck that in your thing, make sure those colors are set properly, and you're good to go, right? So there we go. I talked a lot about some very nitty-gritty details, but ultimately, I mean, it's a really simple stack to configure, okay? That manifest file has all the proper data. I talked about the htaccess rules, the importance of naming that manifest file, manifest, okay? Definitely just follow the steps in that manifest stack. It's kind of a step-by-step process. As long as you follow everything in that stack, you're going to be golden, okay? And make sure you check out our other videos we have on creating the icons. And if you want some sort of behind the scenes stuff on kind of how a lot of this PWA stuff works, you can go ahead and watch that video as well. So take care. I hope you enjoyed PWA, and we'll see you on the community. Bye.